Good morning, everybody. Happy Black Friday to you. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I'm your co-host, Trey Holiday. And you guys know I got to bring in my co-host, my guy, Big O. Happy Friday, Big O. Happy Black Friday to you.
Yeah. How are you, Trina?
I'm well. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How was Thanksgiving? You celebrate Thanksgiving?
No.
Okay. How was your day yesterday? Whatever it is that you did.
It was relaxing, still family time, nice and relaxing. How about you?
Yeah, no, it was solo dough around here, man. You know what I'm saying? Didn't really catch up with the family. It's too many elders in different places. So, you know what I'm saying? Just kind of sat it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it wasn't eventful. I'll say that much.
COVID holidays have changed a lot. That's for sure, my friend.
Yeah, for some people, for a lot of people, for millions of people, it did not. For millions of people, life went on as usual, and we'll see what happens. We'll see in a few weeks here what the numbers around COVID is looking like, and if there's a spike that's come out of this holiday weekend.
Right. Well, you see, Nikki keeps saying it's those small gatherings and you think you're with family, but if it's not your home pod, that's where we're seeing spread. So we'll see.
Right. Speaking of that, we're joined today by Nikki Barron's going to be talking about some COVID updates. We're also joined by Kevin Schofield, who has a real interesting take on what's MMR, and that's measles, mumps, rubella. I'm saying it right. Basically, a vaccination that most people get as a child, and how that might play into COVID and the COVID vaccination and how COVID impacts people, at least here in America. Then also we got Laura Kleiss, the intentionalist, and it's all about shopping with Black businesses today. So we're going to be talking to Laura as well. But today is also Native American Heritage Day. And this is also part of Native American Heritage Month. And we've been on message the whole month. The other day, I got a chance to sit down with Seattle City Council member Deborah Juarez. Long interview. It was 44 minutes, and it was really about Native American culture and how things fit in here in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest, the past and the future, some everything else. You can see that right now on don't go right now, but after we get off air, you go to our YouTube page and you'll see the interview there with Council Member Juarez. Here's a short clip, though, from the beginning of the interview with myself and Council Member Juarez. We really thought here at the Morning Update Show that it was important to reach out to our Native brothers and sisters, especially during Native American Heritage Month, and really talk about Native American heritage. So I, again, want to thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. And it's nice that we have a month dedicated to Native American Heritage Month besides Indigenous Peoples Day. But probably like you, it should be, I know there's the Black History Month. It probably should just be part and parcel of life that people recognize Indigenous folks, and beyond the performative, I want to recognize them on Indigenous land. It's really a way of living and a way of being raised, and how you treat people and how you respect elders and wisdom and age and experience and tradition and culture and language. It's just kind of all part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. What is, when we talk about Native American heritage, especially here in Seattle, it's so much, there's so many things that are like Native in names and cities, locations, and things like that, almost to the point though that it's not recognized as Native anymore. If that makes any sense
it does.
To you.
It's become anglicized to the point where Mount Rainier is like really Mount Tahoma or Seattle, and all these, when you hear Alki, those are all from the Lashute language. When I'm back home in Browning, Blackfeet country, it's the same thing. People don't even recognize anymore. We've become part of the scenery, but what's more important is people should know the history behind that and why certain places have names. And like any language comes from culture and landscape and the territory in which you're brought up, and you have names for things. And you're right, we don't always recognize the importance of language in the naming and sense of place and sacredness. And so to have it where people are starting to understand that That's very important.
All right. So Councilmember Ward is there. And also, so she went off script and actually gave me a quiz. And the quiz you can actually find on the Crosscut websites. Like, how much do you know about Native American culture here at Pacific Northwest? And I got 7 out of 8. And it really could have been 8 out of 8. It was 7 out of 8 there. But this is question number 2 that she posed to me.
Okay, let's continue. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Question number 2. How many federally recognized tribes are there in the United States? A, 574, B, 832, C, 59, D, 75. 574, 832, 59, or 75.
I'm going to say 574.
Yes, 2 for 2.
All right. So, yeah, I got 7 out of 8. Apparently, you know what I'm saying, other people around, like so there was somebody on her staff that got like 4 out of 8. So 7 out of 8. I told her, though, I'm like, you know, I'm part of the culture. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you got that recorded because you're always spitting facts around here about Washington, about the history. You know a lot, my friend. It's good that you got it captured.
You know, people know it's real deal. It's not just me talking. There was one thing I wanted to bring up here, actually, before we move on to our other stories, and I'll add it here myself. This was on Twitter. I did put a tweet out yesterday. It was so well responded on Twitter and on social media. And just, you know, was just kind of echoing our thankfulness over here. I said, I'm thankful for the people of Seattle, so many of whom are struggling right now, one way or another, but who remain stoic, resilient, and optimistic. I see you and I give you thanks. So, you know, tweeted that out yesterday and real receptive, you know, because you keep it real, man. People out there struggling and everything, and acknowledge that.
Absolutely. I mean, it does take all of us. And I think the acknowledgement is important right now. We're seeing that. I saw that on people's feeds all day yesterday as so many Americans were celebrating Thanksgiving. More were just like, look, let's learn about the history here so we can be educated and informed. It was beautiful.
All right. So we'll take it to, we got 2 national stories today. One's national, but it's about local. But the other one is still kind of following what's going on in Washington, D.C. Yo, it was wild yesterday. I was watching, like, the president was calling troops overseas for Thanksgiving, and he just he went on and on. Anyway, here's a short clip right here from NBC News.
Tonight, defiant and denying his own defeat, President Trump answered questions for the first time since Election Day.
I don't know what is going to happen. I know one thing, Joe Biden did not get 80 million votes.
Asked if he will concede more obstruction.
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud.
Pushed about whether he would vacate the White House January 20th if the electors finalize the Biden victory.
Certainly I will. Certainly I will.
The president's legal team has not shown fraud or irregularities that would overturn the results, but the president vented.
And the whole world is watching, and the whole world is laughing at our electoral process.
President Trump angry and lashing out minutes after he thanked overseas troops for their service. He criticized Joe Biden for forming a cabinet and would not publicly commit to attending the inauguration. Earlier today, Joe Biden followed a more traditional playbook. In a video message from Delaware, President-elect Joe Biden urged a small stay-at-home Thanksgiving because of COVID.
It's a personal sacrifice that each of our families can make and should make to save somebody else's life. But it's also a shared sacrifice for the whole country.
The president, who spent much of his holiday on the golf course, was also taking more swings on Twitter, again to impugn Joe Biden's victory and undermine election integrity. The president's anger boiled over at reporters.
Don't talk to, I'm the president of the United States. Don't ever talk to the president that way.
And President Trump says he will go back on the campaign trail, committing to go to Georgia, where he will work on behalf of 2 Senate Republicans who are in runoff races that will determine the control of the Senate. The president also would not comment on whether he would run again himself in 2024, insisting that the 2020 race is not yet over, claiming he won with only hints of recognition that he knows his time here at the White House is nearly over.
All right. And so, yeah, it was like 36 or 40 minutes yesterday. He said that Stacey Abrams has already harvested 900,000 votes. He said, I mean, he kind of went on and on. And I think just right now, a court in Pennsylvania actually just kicked out another one of President Trump's lawsuits over there. But oh no, man, the saga continues.
Yeah, it definitely does. And my question immediately goes to how much of the taxpayers' dollars are being spent on these cases. I really wonder about our resources as a country and what is happening here on the back end. Again, yeah. I think this is a big thing, and we'll be seeing how this plays out. But it's crazy that he's still making those kinds of sentiments. But right. Also, we're used to him doing that. So. Unfortunate. He
has to pay for the for all these court challenges, which is why the Trump administration sent out over 300 fundraising emails because they have to pay for it. But moving on. So this was Wednesday night on Nightline. So Nightline was back 6 months later. You remember we were actually on Nightline, or it's not quite 6 months, so June, July, August, September, October. Oh, it's 6 months since George Floyd. And so Nightline did a follow-up. You'll see some of our footage in here, but this is a clip where Nightline talked to Seattle Police Chief Diaz, and it was real interesting at the end of the clip what Chief Diaz says about investment in community.
Some of the loudest cries over the past 6 months have been for radical change, including calls to defund the police. City leaders in Baltimore, Portland, and Philadelphia pledging to drastically cut or reallocate funding of their police departments.
I think every police department right now is trying to figure out how they look at policing in general. How do they reimagine what policing should be? But it's really about looking at our policies and practices and our vision of every police department to ensure that we're moving in the right direction.
Let's bring this down.
In Seattle, weeks of fierce protests culminated in a takeover of a police precinct. Protesters created a cop-free zone. Bowing to activist demands, the city council pledged to slash the department's budget by 50%. In response, the city's first black police chief resigned.
It really is about the overarching lack of respect for the officers.
Her successor, Chief Adrian Diaz, facing pressure from activists to make good on those cuts. What's your take on the defund the police movement?
I don't support kind of the abolitionist movement of getting rid of police departments. I want to make sure that the department is run efficiently, that the department has its resources, that the department also has the tools to ensure that if we're looking at restorative justice, if we're looking at programs to support our community, that there is investments in those communities.
All right, so you see Chief Diaz right there. He talked about restorative justice. He talked about if there's programs in the community to make sure that there's investment in community. This is City of Seattle Police Chief.
And it really is the right sentiment right now. I think it's to have a stern kind of position around, hey, defund. Obviously, he's a police chief, so he's not going to be like, yeah, I'm totally for defunding our entire operation here. But I like that he's talking about understanding there are community-rooted solutions with regard to taking some of the pressure off of the police, and how can we fund those programs appropriately so that folks on the ground can actually give those kinds of services to their community. I like that. I like hearing that from Chief Diaz.
All right, and you see, and by the way, we let Nightline borrow that footage. We still never sold any footage, and some of that footage was from the original broadcast that Nightline did on June 18th, 2020. We were in that segment with Chief Scoggins that I played. Was it earlier this week or whatever with Chief Scoggins? That's how I remember. I'm like, yo, we were there in the clip. All right, so we're going to move along, and we're going to bring in Nikki here in the news part of this. Please, all you bring in Nikki Barron. Nikki was busy on her COVID show, and Nikki actually had 2 interviews that were real important. One was with the Superior Courts, talking about the eviction program that we mentioned the other day to try to head off evictions between tenants and landlords. And the other one is she talked to School Director Brandon Hersey. What's up? How are you?
I'm good. Just hanging out at home.
All right. So I know we're going to see you again in our segment later on here this morning about COVID, but maybe you could set up these clips. The first one is about the Superior Court and their program around evictions.
Right. So I was able to catch up with a commissioner working on this, and essentially the King County Court is trying to create a program of mediation so landlords and tenants can come together before the eviction moratorium is expired to make a resolution. So in the interview, which will air in its entirety on an upcoming episode of our COVID show, they discuss that essentially, both parties can come to the table, and it's not just, hey, let's make a payment plan, but you also get an expert who can help you with finding grants and other resources to help actually pay that back rent, and the landlord and the tenant get to come to the table. So here's a little clip where I ask him to explain what the process looks like when you join this program.
At this point, there are 2 stages: the pre-moratorium lifting and after the moratoriums have lifted. Right now, it is a voluntary program, and it started by the landlord providing a notice. It's like a 10-day notice to the tenant expressing interest in and essentially offering, inviting the tenant to join them in this process and scheduling a mediation session. They're handled by the Dispute Resolution Center, King County, and there are staff attorneys available from the Housing Justice Project, volunteer attorneys. There is no cost to anyone for this process, and free interpreters are also available if needed. But there's a notice that goes out, and if the tenant doesn't respond to that, there's a second 10-day notice that will go out. The DRC representative, they are all trained, call them eviction resolution specialists. They're all prepared to try and contact the tenant directly to encourage them to come and take part in the process. And again, the hope to resolve any outstanding non-payment of rent issues in a context that will allow people to sort of think outside the box a little more than going into court, and just with the rather limited remedies that are available in that kind of setting.
All right. So this is good. This eviction resolution program down there at Superior Court, hopefully it can head off some evictions, but also a fairer system for tenants as well as landlords. A lot of people think landlords, they think big corporate property owners, which are out there, but there's a lot of mom and pops who, the home that they're renting is their primary stream of income. So they need their money too.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you, Nikki, for, catching up with the Superior Court on this. I think a lot of people out there are really concerned about how this is going to affect their households. And we know that there are a lot of people that are months behind on their rent due to COVID. So it is going to need some type of stepping system or incremental system to get them to be able to remedy that. So I'm happy to hear all of this, honestly, and thanks for catching up with them. That's really important information for our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so next you talk to school board director for District 7, Brandon Hersey.
Right. Speak a little bit about kind of Seattle's perspective on this concept of outcomes versus safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really can't even be, the conversation that we have around that can't just be Seattle specific. It's got to be, in my opinion, quite frankly, what are we doing to keep our students safe and healthy and keep their families alive versus what are the potential outcomes from missing this time of in-person education. And as an educator myself, teaching second graders, some of our most vulnerable students, what I will say is that kids are incredibly resilient. And when we're thinking about all the risks that come along with children potentially going back to school, carrying the virus back home, especially to generational households, I don't see how an individual could look at everything that's happening across our country in states where coronavirus is exploding beyond all measure and not really have a clear understanding of what is the pathway forward to slowing the spread and eventually moving past this virus. There was actually just a study that came out in the from the University of Princeton where it showed that coronavirus in children are actually beginning to be seen in the largest coronavirus case tracking study, that there's new evidence that children could be key to the spread of coronavirus, right? So I say that to say that, as you mentioned before, the evidence is very, very conflicting. We frankly just don't know. And in situations like this, it is our job as elected officials and the leaders of the system to be conservative with the health and the safety of not only our children, but their families and the communities in which they live, learn, and play. So we have to be prepared to make those decisions and do everything that we can on the back end to ensure that we're making up for as much missed educational opportunities as possible. But for right now, as we even start to see our cases in King County continue to spike, we have to do what we know is right and continue to move forward with a remote model in the interest of keeping our students and their families safe.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh.
There we go. All right. So we got cut off there in the beginning, but we jumped right into the clip. What else did you pull out of your interview with Director Hersey?
Right. So when I caught up with Director Hersey on our COVID update show on Wednesday, what we discussed was what data is the school board looking at when it comes to making decisions around safety and the pandemic. We talked about who actually makes the decisions and weighs in. And then we had a really robust conversation about weighing the risk of COVID and transmission with student outcomes. And so you saw one bit of that conversation just there in the clip, but you can find the full conversation as well as Omari and I's commentary on the full episode, which is easy to find, is whereweconverge.com. Go to our COVID resources page and you find the full episode. You can also listen to it as a podcast on your favorite streaming platform. And I'll put the link here in the comments for you.
All right, Nikki, thank you very much. We're going to catch up with you later on in the show so we can get our COVID update.
Yeah.
All right. So next in our headlines, after that, we're going to jump directly into Kevin Schofield. But if you could put this one up here, Oya. It says here, 21 more Seattle area restaurants and bars closed permanently during COVID-19 fall surge. And man, it's a few of these that I used to go to. I see Barca, Bar Sue. We used to go there. Motown on Monday for Bar Sue, the Boar's Nest, El Diablo Coffee. I mean, it's quite a few. These businesses, they're closing up and they're not coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we keep talking about this and how hard it was for restaurateurs, bar owners. I mean, literally, this has been a hard hit for those businesses in particular, especially when we think about the insurances that were available to them. And hey, if they were doing anything, if they were trying to, change their service, they were having a hard time. So again, this is really hitting the economy very hard. And I think it's important, again, when we reiterate why it's important for local people to support local businesses and local business owners and local establishments. This right here is exactly why.
Yeah, and we're seeing it. I mean, downtown, the block that we're on here, almost every business on this block now is closed, like closed permanently. There's a few that have different operating hours, but it's just closed up for sale, and some everything else. So